Good evening to our friends in India. Good morning to our friends in the US, and good afternoon to our friends in Europe. It is such a pleasure to welcome all of you to the second day of the Global Law School Summit. And we are entering into a new thematic session entitled Global Lawyering, Globalization of Legal Profession. We have with us an absolutely fantastic group of leaders in the world of law. Let me begin by introducing Ms. Pallavi Shroff, Managing Partner, Shardul, Amarchand, Mangaldas and Company. We have with us Mr. Sudhir Mishra, the Founder and Managing Partner, Trust Legal. We will be having with us very shortly Mr. Nishith Desai, Founder, Nishith Desai Associates, Mr. Chris Parsons, Chairman, India Practice, Herbert Smith, Freehills, United Kingdom, and Mr. Gautam Narasimhan, Partner, Allen & Overy, Singapore. Let me begin by briefly introducing the theme of this afternoon's panel discussion. For all professions, globalization had brought in responsibilities as professions were called upon to become part of global governance, the management of the affairs of the nascent global society. Global society being postmodernist in character, a larger level of reconstruction of society was required, which prompted professions to extraordinarily reimagine the socio-political and legal order. For professions, this era was a post-professionalism, that is a rediscovery of professional values, approaches, and indeed frameworks. In this session, we tell the story of legal professions' self-transformation and its role in transforming the world. Particularly in the context of legal profession, there was a large-scale segmentation of legal functions. This is due to the exponential increase in the number of global deals and transactions at all levels, which demanded regulation and control. This development coincided with the loss of exclusivity of professions over subject matters which were previously within the exclusive remit and competency of professions. Such a loss has prompted professions to remark their disciplinary and functional perimeters, which is in addition to a new inclusivity professions have espoused. At the proverbial surface, this has manifested in the form of the rise of limited liability partnership firms, which have legal professionals with specialist and super specialist knowledge and skills. They offer transnational services of global standards. Their work is characterized by speed, efficiency, and optimal outcomes, all of which are essential for the sustenance of global society. The ecosystem of work these firms have been able to create attract large number of young law graduates to become part of their function. This primarily owes to the sense of participation in the global process and opportunities to contribute to that process law firms have been able to create. Lawyering too has had its own transformations. There was a dramatic change in the nature of disputes before the courts as society had moved on to a new mode of production which created and defined new social relations. There was also a broadening of public consciousness at various levels, primarily because of the public concern that a global society, which is the neoliberal society, might overdo in pursuit of capital, and it is a civil society's responsibility to exert control over global forces. For example, the rise of environmental and constitutional consciousness and the increasing awareness and invocation of public rights are all sound examples. In the wake of these transformations, lawyers reorganized their knowledge and skills. There was a spirit of renewalism and reorganization, which enabled them to steer the legal profession through these challenges. The globalization of legal profession has changed not only its institutional framework, but also its patterns of function. The profession today is highly dynamic, requiring upskilling and mastery over new areas of law. This has prompted law schools also to understand the needs of the profession and redefine their academic curriculum and pedagogy. The legal profession's collective response to globalization has to be seen in its totality for a better understanding and appreciation of its role and functions. I hope this colloquium will fulfill that ambition. Let me move to some of the questions that we intend to discuss during the course of this panel discussion. My first question is to Ms. Pallavi Shroff. First off, let us build a perspective to look at the transformation of legal profession. Now, we understand that rather than a gradual transformation, these changes were triggered by a big bang. That is the liberalization of Indian economy in India in response to global demands. This was a political step. So my question to you is, what was the initial response of the legal profession to these changes?
I'm here.
How did the professional reorganization start? Over to you, Pallavi. Hi, Nishith, and hi, Chris. Good to see you.
Hi, Raj. Nice to see you too. Nice to see Pallavi, Sudhir, and Nishith as well.
So, Raj, if I just step back into 1991 and what was the legal profession then, and then from then on, we can see what changes have happened. So 1991 was essentially a time when you had a few corporate lawyers, but essentially, when you were a lawyer, you were a litigating lawyer, you went to court every day, and you argued your matters. Either there was a dichotomy in the legal bar, which was the senior counsel and the junior counsel, or you had solicitors and non-solicitors, which of course luckily that got sort of abolished way early. So you still had the litigation perspective. A client approached you when you essentially the client had a problem. Now I need to go to court, I need to see a lawyer. With the liberalization and the inward flow of funds and the complex structuring, because we still have the foreign exchange laws, I think a whole new gamut of laws had opened up. And that is when the real corporate practice in India started. So I think firms were earlier, if I may say, off the block and realizing this opportunity of a whole new practice of laws, if I may call that. Not that it didn't exist before, but it was very restricted and very limited. And now there was a whole vast scope of how do you structure investments into India? How do you navigate Indian laws? What are the regulatory issues and things like that? So that was the first change, the realization that, a whole new perspective was going to be required. So the acquisition of that knowledge became quite important, if you ask me, at that stage. And how did firms do it? Firms worked together with the foreign law firms as, maybe co-counsel, maybe just a support role initially till they became sort of competent in their own right to handle the deals. Or you got people who were working overseas, decided to come back and work, so they brought that knowledge of how the global world runs and what these deals meant. And you started understanding the client needs. Even though I think that era started with chartered accountants still trying to run corporate deals and with their limited perspective on legal issues, I think that was the first beginning that happened. And slowly realize that they need lawyers rather than just chartered accountants for legal issues. I think the second evolution, if I may look at within the period, the second phase, if I could call, is typically when, sole proprietorships became part. Even if you had to do a very large dispute, or you had a corporate matter and you needed to work together you did a due diligence, you needed 5, 7, 10 people. So that's when the second phase, I think, of the growth of the concept of a firm. We had just the old firms and then the new firms sort of started in 1991. As the size of the firms increased, I think people realized that they needed to sort of do different things with the aspirations of the people inside the firms. So then the focus started happening on governance of the firms and the challenges that firms met as they grew larger. And it said that with every 100 people that you add in any organization, you need a new you need to review the existing rules. Will the same rules get you any further or not? So I think that was a whole phase too. You started specializations. You had done enough power projects. So to have a better depth of knowledge of power projects. Privatization started happening. So that depth of knowledge came in. You had understanding needs of young and the aspirations of younger partners. More partners were brought into the firm. So that was that whole second phase of growth. The third phase of growth was probably some mergers and amalgamations within the firms itself, acquisition of talent. Talent became more mobile than it was ever. And I think in more recent times, I think I've seen, more I think 3 or 4 aspects which are quite important recent in the last 3, 4, 5 years. One is Indian law firms have started opening office overseas. Nishith has had an office for a long time. We've seen Khaitan and Cyril Amarchand also opening offices. So that's been one big phenomenon. I think second is the adoption of technology. One fine morning, we were all working from home instead of going to offices. Huge, huge change. So I think the phase is now for looking at technology, law, technology, and innovation. Then the concept of growth of governance and management of organization of your law firms, I think, and how even senior counsel, for example, will organize themselves. And the fourth important point is the onset of social media. And all of this has impacted the practice of law, if I could say that.
Thank you very much, Pallavi, for setting the tone for this discussion. I think you've really given a historical and contemporary evolution of the growth of legal profession in India and the new challenges that have emerged. Let me quickly move to Chris Parsons. Chris, you've been a long-term both observer and participant in the Indian saga, both having an insider-outsider look at what is working, what isn't, and how it has changed. So my question to you is that how did a law firm like you and somebody like you in particular see this kind of inherent contradiction that was constantly playing in the Indian arena? At one level, there was a strong appetite to see that opening up happening from 1991. At another level, there were signs of protectionism at multiple levels, including entry of law firms into India. How did your own firm and you position yourself in this Indian context?
Great, thank you, Raj. Look, as you said, I think Pallavi set the scene perfectly and actually covered a lot of the very radical changes that have occurred within the legal profession since the significant liberalization of the economy. And what hasn't happened, of course, is that there hasn't been the liberalization of legal practice within India. And so the way in which international firms have looked to play a role, I guess, are in two most obvious ways. One is in relation to inbound transactions into India. So whether that's a strategic acquisition by a Facebook or a Google, or whether it's a private capital transaction from a SoftBank or a KKR or Goldman. So that's the inbound transaction. And then on the outbound transaction, Indian companies doing things around the world. And you know, perhaps one of the most famous being Tata Motors buying Jaguar Land Rover, for example. Now, on both of those sorts of deals, there is often what I might refer to as a sort of an umbrella agreement, an umbrella transaction. And that umbrella agreement may be subject to English law. And so both on the inbound and on the outbound, there is a role for international law firms to advise on English law. We do not advise on Indian law. So that's the way in which we have looked to get involved. That's why we have, along with a number of our peer group firms, very strong India desks. So we're looking after Indian clients doing things outside of India and international clients doing things inside of India. And then in relation to both of those aspects, we would need to work alongside our friends in India because both of those will have Indian law aspects, particularly on the inbound arrangements that will be subject to Indian law and Indian regulations. So we will work with our friends in those circumstances.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much for that. Let me move to Nishith. Nishith, of course, I want to shift gears a bit and talk with you a little bit about reorganization of legal profession. I mean, as we know, there has been a reorganization of legal profession, which has happened at a macro level through adoption of new values and goals. Whereas at the micro level, there has been emphasis on redesigning the patterns and styles of function. Your own firm is a very good example. Now, this obviously includes adoption of a governance model by inculcating a larger sense of accountability, both individual and collective, professional ethics, and teamwork. So my question to you is that, how did you achieve this in your own firm and functional domains? I've heard you passionately talking about the Wachtell-Lipton model. And how did that come about within the context of what was seen to be an Indian law firm which had a global ambition?
Well, thank you so much, Raj. I'm sorry, I was on mute. Okay. So thank you, first of all, Raj, for inviting me here. And Pallavi, Chris, I think you have made very good points and recall the history that we have all seen. We have seen almost all now, right? Right from even 1973 when I finished my law. I'm not that old, by the way, but we have seen all how exchange controls operated and then got liberalized for NRIs, and then 1991 comes, one set of liberalization, 2000 comes, and there is Y2K, and then there are other things coming up. So as I see, what happened for me personally, because you asked me that question, was that it was in 1984, I got some opportunity to do corporate philosophy study for one of the large multinationals in the US. Most of my work grew in the US because my specialization was international tax and globalization. So 99% of clients were there. But when in 84, I got the opportunity. And then from there, I learned certain interesting aspects of organizational behavior. And then I looked at over 100 law firms. I was suggested to set up a law firm. I was solo, like I'm a counsel. And, and then I had to, I said, let me also try to learn from other people. So I studied histories of law firms, the great law firms we had in UK, US, etc. So 4.5 years, I studied law firms, their behavior, their ethos, principles, and stuff like that. And I was a small, so, idea was to have, look at what could I learn from others. So Dr. Lipton, one of the examples that struck me, and that was very good. But imitation is best form of appreciation. That's one thing. But I said, if Dr. Lipton is there, then I have to do something myself as well. And apart from the traditional kind of work, which we all were doing at that point of time, and most of the work on Wall Street, etc., what happened was, I said, what can I do different, and how can I add value to the existing firm? Because we have all the firms, Amarchand and everyone else, little company at that point of time, Mullah. So if I can be complementary, I'm a supporting star at the end of the day, right? I'm a small person. So I said, let me do one thing. Most of them were looking at as was mentioned, the regular practice. So I said, they can look back with pride about 100 years. And of course, they are very dynamic now as well. But then let me look to the future and build practice on that. So combining with Dr. Lipton model, I thought, let me build practice based on the future of law. And the philosophy came up that every new technology, every new business model, every new social, political, economic development brings along with it a new strategic, legal, tax, or ethical issues. So started doing research, because I've been researcher anyway. So I started doing research and looking at new technologies coming over a period of next 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, and see what will be future legal, strategic, tax, ethical issues that will be coming up. I started writing papers and stuff like that. So when actual time comes, then I'm somewhat ready to meet those challenges. That has been the major model. So it's a mix of different law firms. Every law firm has its own beauty. And I've tried to see, let me find out some beauty spots, and at the same time, create some new model. So that is how I set up law firm in 1919. And luckily, 1990, 91, India opened up. And whatever I learned in the US or elsewhere in the world suddenly became handy. That gave me a little edge. And then came 2000, which gave me a little further edge in terms of technology, understanding and stuff like that. And fortunately, what happened, I couldn't hire too many people. So I got people from engineering, from medicine, from MBAs. So assimilated all those talent, but turned them, everyone had to do law, okay? And because legal professional ethics are very important. So that's how the practice gives a generation. Now we believe, and I just close here, it has been almost 30 years, 1990 set of law firm. And so at that time, we had to teach people on commercial law, because that was the element that was missing, and the global project management. But now I think that we have all of us have done reasonably all right, And next phase that I'm looking at is that we have to create next generation of socially responsible lawyers. And that is what I'm currently paying a little more attention to, because there is no end to growing big, no end to doing everything. We have to continue adding the value. But I think both we have to combine and have a holistic growth. So next phase that I'm looking at is, and based on that, organizational models have to change. And, I don't want to get into details at this point in time. Happy to do some other time. But this is just a little perspective and I think Pallavi and Nick and everybody talked, Chris spoke very well. So I don't want to add too much, but I thought
Thank you, Nishith, for those very valuable comments. We will come back and revisit some of those issues. Gautam, let me come to you. Now, of course, you are a bit of a poster boy for the globalization of legal profession. You went to law school in India and then studied at NYU Law School, and then got yourself admitted into New York Bar. And now you are in Singapore working for a British law firm. In a way, can we say that this is a kind of a quintessential model that is going to become more and more common in the future? Is this what the future of globalization of legal profession is going to be, where geography and the original jurisdiction in which a person has earned his or her law degree is going to matter less and less, and more the opportunities for one to work in different jurisdiction is going to emerge, particularly in the context of international law firms?
Thank you, Raj, and thank you very much for having me participate in this panel, and privileged to be here. It's a very interesting question. I mean, there are two parts to this. One is, the sort of internationalization of sort of a practitioner's, opportunities in a sense, because I obviously, went to the National Law School, graduated in 2000, and then literally my journey has been eastbound in a sense. From New York, after spending a few months working there, I spent 6 years in London and then came to Singapore. And I guess, firstly on the mobility across different sort of jurisdictions, unfortunately, I don't think it's gotten easier, right? If anything, I think, the localization requirements have gotten more. So for instance, the ease of foreign practitioners qualifying into the UK, which was, I had to literally do half an exam to become a UK solicitor. That's now become a lot more of a involved process. I got, again, when Singapore opened up the ability for foreign qualified lawyers to become locally qualified, I got locally qualified, but that also has become tougher. So in some sense, I think law as a profession, whether it's transactional law or particularly litigation, doesn't lend itself for ease of mobility, when you compare it to some of our clients, like investment banks, PE funds, etc., right? There, the practitioners just chase the opportunity, whereas for us, local qualifications is still a challenge. But having said that, if you ask me, is sort of, chasing opportunities across different parts of the world, is that going to become some kind of a, normal course for particularly, Indian law students, Indian lawyers looking to work overseas? I think I would hope that is the case, right? I think, in my instance, I went to the US. Obviously, had the good fortune of getting to know you in the US there, and then obviously London, around 2000 to 21 years ago, the British firms, the English firms, were opening up their training contracts for, Indian law students. That was a good opportunity. But also the London as a financial center really literally exploded at that time. The whole private equity leverage finance market, which is an area that I follow, that's grown. And then in some ways that opportunity brought me to Singapore. So it's the internationalization of our client pool, the products that we work in. That's, that has grown. Now, I feel Asia is an opportunity that is a real opportunity for all law firms, right? The scale of that opportunity is depends on each law firm and the appetite they have. But growth of places like Singapore, if you look at Singapore and how it's grown over the last, say, 15 years, today it houses probably the largest number of new arbitrations anywhere in the world the SEAC takes in, of which India constitutes more than 50% of all new arbitrations. So I'd say that my journey has been a journey which has in some ways also tracked the growth of some of these financial hubs like Hong Kong and Singapore. I hope it's a blueprint. I hope it's something that continues on. But I believe that opportunities, in my own personal view, is places like Singapore will grow because there is, the sort of the hub status is growing, and that could be, opportunities. Who know? I mean, later on in the future, you could have, I'd see Dubai could be a potential sort of, they're investing in growing that as a hub as well. So there could be other places that come up, not just New York and London.
Great. Thank you so much, Gautam, for that. Sudhir, let me now move to you because we've heard the story and evolution of major Indian and British law firms here, the Indian law firms going global and the British law firms themselves coming into other parts of the world. Now, of course, your own journey is about what I call the new age entrepreneurial law firm. So my question to you is that what is the scope and the a future of these entrepreneurial law firms like yours, which have emerged, which are in many ways creating new sets of opportunities for a range of bright young working professionals in law who want to aspire to pursue excellence in legal profession, but need not necessarily be doing that working in a large law firm. What is it that makes the opportunities that a firm like yours offers quite unique in the Indian context?
Thank you, Professor Raj, and good evening to everybody. I primarily did environment climate change for 21 years, and first 10 years was mostly national park wildlife sanctuaries. And that was a time we didn't have even a website, or we were not supposed to have a website. That culture started. But something called LinkedIn in last 5-6 years has changed the entire legal landscape for most of our small or modest law firms, which are very sector specific or focused in one single specialty. And what LinkedIn has done, and because Pallavi also mentioned the power of the social media and the digital landscape, which has completely changed, that LinkedIn gives you a platform which basically leapfrogging the website space. So whatever practice you are doing, whatever updates you are doing, and I'm doing it since 2011-12, never thought it will become an engine of growth for a firm. So suppose there's a World Plastic Conference is happening in Bologna in Italy. Somebody approaches you because they think you are an environmental lawyer in India. You go and participate in that conference. And from there, a multinational Indian company hires you because they know that you are an environmental lawyer in India. So that's the power of this whole digital media which has happened. Now you are not beating the Bar Council rules also, you're not changing them. At the same time, when you become a mainstream firm or you try to become a mainstream firm, now we do virtually everything. We have a large media broadcasting law practice. We realize that most of our work is happening because you are leapfrogging certain stages. You are being judged. You cannot just write something on your website or say something and that will be seen in isolation. Your transactions are being weighted in real time. All your updates are coming in real time. There are multiple platforms which all is getting focused, and that is keeping you open to probe. So if Nishith Desai has a great website and great research papers are coming there, others will have to go and compete with that. They will have to learn the kind of standards which are being set up. And that is a real open world. At the same time, there are 4 big audit firms which have no restrictions on them. They have 10,000, 12,000 people working for them. You have Facebooks, we have Walmart, we have Amazon coming to India. Their general counsels have 100, 150 people working under them. So globalization has already happened. I'm a door tenant in an important UK chamber, which has given the Attorney General of United Kingdom right now. There are a lot of reports which we prepare here on climate change are being seen there as well now. because they want to know what we are doing about a particular river, about a particular thing. And back then in 1970s, Rajkumar, when MC Mehta started his environmental litigation, he started with river pollution. All that came from Europe. Now the same reverse thing is happening from India to other parts. So basically it all has got mixed up and the opportunities are in real time. It's like a OTT revolution. The same thing is happening. The last point is we are at a very critical stage, like the Chitrahar, when we used to see in 1983, 84, one TV channel, one Wednesday you'll have music. Similarly, artificially you have closed the legal profession. So you can, when you go to an International Bar Association conference, you know that in 2010 or 11 in Vancouver, there'll be 10 firms or 12 firms. Today, there are 70 firms which are going to South Korea when it happened physically for the last time in 2019. So you're artificially stopping it. Eventually, you'll have to open it because others are taking advantage, whether it's Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Dubai, whosoever. So there we are at the crossroads.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sudhir. Well, that's a fantastic first round of discussion. For all those who are watching us live on Facebook and YouTube, do send in your questions. I'll be taking up those questions with our panelists. Let me move to Pallavi. Pallavi, so having established this evolution, I want to ask you a question about the concept of an advocate. Now, of course, while I don't mean to say that it's no longer court-centered, there have been new sites of functioning for a lawyer. Can we draw a distinction between the functioning of legal professionals in these different and varied sites? Sudhir talked about the kind of the big four involved in a bit of law. Then there are, of course, in-house legal counsel who are doing legal practice. Then, of course, there are lawyers and law firm partners like you. So do you think that this diversity of the legal profession transforms the identity of legal professionals? Does everyone feel being an advocate as the functional phenomenology of advocates as we classically understood, or for that matter, appreciate?
I think over the last 20, 25 years, I think there has been a really phenomenal change. And that's not to say that if you are a corporate lawyer, you are not a lawyer or an advocate. So all of us who pass out from with a law degree, we enroll at the bar, some after giving, the younger people after giving exam, we just sort of enrolled at the bar. Some of us practice law in the traditional form, which is go to court. There is a dispute. Your client comes to you and you take the matter to court or to arbitration or to a regulatory authority. So that's one aspect. But today what has happened is, even if you are a disputes lawyer, you find that your client is coming to you way ahead of a dispute starting. When the client feels that there is something that's not right from starting from, if it's a contractual dispute on a contract, managing a contract, say, of a large infrastructure potential dispute. What do I write? How do I write? Should I respond or not? So you start thinking strategy right from the time the problem sort of begins. So I think that is a huge difference that we are seeing. So even pre-contractual, pre-disputes, actually, you start coming in and playing a role. On the corporate side, as Chris mentioned, the transactions are both inbound and outbound. They are private equity, they're strategic, they're venture capital. You can classify them and slice them and dice them in different ways. And a lot of them have got very sophisticated. You know, there are nuances to each of these games. And I think having done so many deals, people have now sort of learned how to deal with these things, you know. Certainly in the beginning, we all worked with the foreign law firm. We've done deals with Herbert Smith and with A&O and other firms. But so that's how we all got into the game. And if you think that these guys don't practice law, I think we are mistaken. They have to do as much research on positions of law before they can take, because somebody is going to challenge them and they're going to have to answer why that position. Take particularly things like reps and warranties or indemnities. You know, they are not going to be able to negotiate their positions well enough unless they have actually researched this and know enough about the law. So I think they both do the law. I think the third aspect that we all need to look at are the in-house law, in-house legal departments. A lot of the bigger corporations have massive in-house legal departments. Sometimes the larger global firms will have 100 lawyers in their legal department, which are sometimes bigger than law firms in India or many of the other countries. So I think, how good are they? Why they have to, under Indian law, of course, they suspend their license to practice. So traditionally, they're not practicing, but they have internal clients whom they advise. They are also expected to know the law. And finally, the one sort of group that I understand a little less is the LPOs. There I have my own doubts. How much of law do they practice? Because what goes to them is something that's more routine. It's business process outsourcing, or the process outsourcing, anything that can be done in a repetitive manner by use of technology or other things. So I'm not sure much about them, whether they feel they're practicing, but in any of the other forms, I think at the base end of it, I think you still practice law and you get the feeling that you are practicing law.
Thank you very much, Pallavi. That was a fascinating set of responses and reflections about the nature and the contours of the legal profession. Let me move to Chris. Now, Chris, one of the things that has motivated many people to enter into law itself was the fact that law is a means of social change. The classic notions of law being a public interest, the pursuit of public interest is the larger focus on the role of lawyers. Now, in corporate law firms generally, particularly in the US and maybe in other parts of the world, have used the pro bono framework for promoting this particular aspect. Do you see that the globalization of legal profession, as lawyers tend to work in multiple jurisdictions, the possibility to continue to be committed to these social causes, pro bono or otherwise, has the potential to be diminished? The public interest aspect of the role of a lawyer, does it run the risk of it being undermined, not just in corporate law firm settings, but even otherwise?
Yeah, look, thanks, Raj. So just a few observations in relation to that, and I'll try and be as candid as possible. I guess the first observation is that, and I'm sort of really speaking to the students who I hope are listening into this, 99% of what we do day to day is not about social change. And I certainly know that when I was at university, I had some, dreams that the lawyers were about being part of society and helping society to change in some way. And so if that's a dream that others have, I'd like to disabuse them of that for the most part. What we do, whether it's dispute resolution, whether it's banking and financing, whether it's corporate, whether it's competition law, etc. These are about meeting client needs, and so it's not really about social change in the classic sense. So that's the first point. The second point is that the way in which we meet needs, two needs really. One is, I think, a perfectly legitimate need that a major organization should play a responsible role in the world, that they do that through various pro bono and sort of diversity initiatives within the law firm itself. And increasingly, international law firms allow the people that work within them to actually spend quite a lot of time on some projects that they may be passionate about. And so that's a point about the firm being responsible, but I think there's also a really important point that if we are to meet the aspirations of junior people coming into the law, we need to find ways in which they feel that not only are they earning a very good living in terms of the law, but they can also contribute in other ways. And they do that through what I would call sort of extracurricular activities rather than through the thrust of the day-to-day mandates. All of that said, I think India is fascinating in this respect because we've all seen that the Supreme Court is rather more creative in India than it is in a number of other jurisdictions. And I'm thinking of some of the decisions made by the Supreme Court in telecoms or in coal allocation, for example. And judges, I think, have looked to step into what they've regarded as something of a lacuna in the governance of India and thought that, look, if government is not going to step in and provide guidance, rules, regulations, and laws to deal with this, then we, the Supreme Court, will do that. So to the extent that there are law firms like those with Pallavi's firm or Sudhir's firm, etc., who are active in that area, then I can see that that is something, and Nishith's firm as well, of course, that is something where you could be saying that you were involved in something of social importance. And so I think India is an interesting melting pot in that respect, and probably more so than a number of other jurisdictions.
Thank you very much, Chris. That's fantastic. And I think the law and policy element is something that our courts have grappled a lot, and many of which has a potential bearing on the public interest that we talked about earlier. Nishith, over to you. Listen, Nishith, you are, of course, you have time and again told us that you are not only running a law firm, but a university. The global transformation demands newer skills and knowledge from legal professions. That is due to the reason that transactions and functions have become global in nature, a quite natural outcome of globalization and the social integration. Now, this has brought about a new approach towards skilling, continuing legal education, and professional development of knowledge. So my question to you is that what ought to be the new generation of skilling methods when it comes to continuing legal education that happens within a law firm? And what is your message to law schools when it comes to creating the ecosystem for which knowledge and learning is a continuous process, and one experience helps them to move into the other in a seamless manner?
So once again, I think wonderful, exposition by Pallavi and Chris and everybody. But as far as continuing education is concerned, your question, in our firm, every single morning we have continuing education, 9 to 10. Everyone needs to attend, including myself. Okay, that is non-negotiable. Rest of the day, what you do, I'm not too much worried. But now, from that continuing education that happens, we have to understand that the ecosystem is now moving to have roles of different other factors. For example, role of innovation. How do you make your people creative? Okay, how do you make them? Just to give you a perspective in the context of information age. It started with data age. You had all the data initially. That was the one thing. When you organize data, it becomes information. When you interpret information, it becomes knowledge. And when you add experience to knowledge, it is wisdom. So we are somewhere at the cusp of information and knowledge. So information is becoming free and all the things. But one sideways that came up is between information age and knowledge age, the creative age, which was not originally envisaged. So now everything goes on to innovation. And I think even in our profession, you must have seen that there is increased importance of innovation. So I think this is what we need to teach people, how to think creatively, how to build innovations, and everything that we do. Everybody is doing it, we are not the only one. Everybody is doing it, but I think that pace has to accelerate, and the whole ecosystem for creating this innovative, mindset has to be inculcated. Second role is as lawyers will be of being thought leaders. Okay, we are so far used to advise based. Is the advice will be of being thought leaders. Okay, we are so far used to advise based. Sorry for the echo. Sorry. Okay. No problem. So I'm saying that, until recently, we used to advise based on what law exists. Now we have to do visualization as to law, what law is likely to be. So merely advising based on the fact that today this is the law, you read it and advise, and I think those days are not gone actually. They coexist with the thought leadership in our own way. We'll have to do that. Next will be role of AI and technology. A lot of work that we are doing will become automated, machine age again. And of course, use of technology that is becoming very critical. In fact, one other thing that law firms have to imbibe now is to put in a lot of security system. I was sitting with about 20 managing partners yesterday. And one thing that was coming up was that has become a minimum standard. So if the audit, actual technology audit, client information, security system, all those things are taking a lot of importance. A role of ethics, of course, I just alluded to, because that is what is going to be the next driver, as I can see. And one other thing, that evolution I see is convergence of business law with human rights. I think that is what I think, modern day slavery, for example, and the other kind of thing that we talk about. I think those issues will become more important. So those who understand both sides will, work around. I already talked about the future technology and other thing. I don't want to go in. And as far as the firms are concerned, more and more firms will become global. And globalization is different from internationalization. Internationalization having offices in different places. But to me, globalization is a matter of mindset. So, you'll be able to do a lot more, just as Sudhir mentioned and others mentioned, that simple website. You can be still global. You can reach out to the world, unlike earlier days. So I think this global mindset is learn something good. All the foreign law firms taught us very interesting principles in the 90s. First of all, how do you compete? How do you manage global projects? How do you do other things? So you learn from them and create and put in place your own processes. So globalization, art of globalization, we'll have to learn how to go in different countries, culture, assimilation, tax laws in those countries, and immigration. Immigration, in my view, has been the biggest impediment to professional services organization, globalization. It is immigration restrictions are the worst form of human rights protectionism and human rights violation. Because we are building those territory. We are human, we are animals. We can go anywhere in the world, right? So I think this is my little pinch at the end of the day, but not. But I'm very much against this immigration regulations. And I hope if other countries open up, our lawyers will go out and do a lot of things together.
Thank you, Nishith. Thank you so much for that. Gautam, before I get into questions, so there are many questions that are coming up and I'm conscious of the time. Gautam, if there is anything this pandemic has taught us, is that the natural sense of resilience that both organizations, institutions are able to adapt to new situations. So my question to you is that do our law firms in general, but maybe your firm in particular, do you think there are practices that you have adapted and adopted during the pandemic? Some of them will be carried forward in the post-pandemic world. Are there learnings, particularly what we ended up doing during this time? Can it be translated and transferred to a post-pandemic world, or that we will redraw and pretty much go back to old ways?
Raj, I think the one thing which, there's a lot of known unknowns about the pandemic because everything evolves every day, right? But I think one thing all of us, at least in A&O, we all agree is that we have offices, in the last count, I think we have more than 34 different offices in different parts of the world, in every continent per se, other than South Africa, South America. We will definitely, the way we work is going to be different. Once, if and when things go back to normalcy at a number of levels. So one is the concept of remote working. Yep, that's here to stay. I think this has been an unfortunate, but I'd say a test case for how our infrastructure can hold up and how lawyers can work outside sort of our customary concept of how we thought we should. I mean, I started my career sharing an office, because that was the old sort of training contract concept where you sit with your supervisor, right? Now, in the last 2 years, we've rolled out the same number of trainees through this, but everyone's done this virtually. The whole training program has happened virtually. Now I'll come to sort of that aspect separately, but from a pure business continuity point of view, I think there's a lot of learnings from how we've learned to work through the pandemic, one of which is the ability to work remotely. Now that's particularly relevant for people who work out of Asia, right? People, for instance, working out of Singapore and Hong Kong. Part of our DNA of working here was to get on a plane and go and meet clients, because Singapore is a hub. You have to go to Jakarta, you come to Mumbai, go to Hong Kong, etc. In the last 2 years, nobody in my office has done a single business trip, but we've had a very productive and successful year. Deals have come in. Therefore, I think if you look at sort of just the raw data that's coming out of international law firms, most law firms have actually financially done very well over the last 18 months, right? Leaving aside the business opportunities with clients, I think the people have responded well, and there have been a lot of good learnings from it. One of which is, I think you can sort of meaningfully do a transaction virtually, right? So I think that is here to stay. I think if you look at, and I can only speak for my firm on this, and we have globally, announced that we will be reducing, for instance, our office footprints all over the world, right? We don't need such big offices, because that, again, from a purely, and again, one of the things, I mean, as a segue to, Chris mentioned about you asked Chris about the ethical aspect of what we do. I think one of the things that is a very real issue for law firms is, especially in light of some of the ESG changes that are happening to the world, some of the clients that we historically worked with are themselves moving out of, some sectors which, from a reputational point of view, from an ethical point of view, for instance, fossil fuels, coal, etc. Those are sectors that a lot of industry participants are coming out, and a lot of law firms now, and including students who are applying to law firms, are asking the same question of law firms, saying, will you actually service clients who are in areas that, for instance, with this whole sort of the environmental summit that's happened, a lot of financial institutions have come out and said they don't want to be, doing these kind of transactions anymore, right? They want to be more environmentally friendly. And that's, again, if you look at it from the impact of the pandemic, is we are traveling less. We are reducing our office footprint. There's been a lot of sort of, I'd say, some probably not planned, but positive effects coming out of that. Now, I think those things will continue, the remote working, flexible working concepts will. However, I'll tell you the one thing that we are very concerned about is the point I think Nishith mentioned earlier is, learning is a big part of what we do, right? Because we are, in a way, in the knowledge industry, right? People come to us for advice, and that can, the ability to train junior lawyers, the ability to have these kind of really knowledge sharing sessions, the ability to have sort of a team-based approach, that suffers if you only work virtually. That's, again, been something that all of us agree. So I'd say that we will have some kind of a hybrid model, but the concept of learning and team-based work working, that shouldn't suffer as a consequence of some of the practices that has happened through the pandemic. And those, I think, will be something that we'll look at carefully when things go back to normalcy.
Thank you, Gautam, for that. Sudhir, quickly, since you have been a pioneer in the environment and social and governance type of work, as you can imagine, worldwide, increasingly ESG is becoming a major area of legal practice. European companies and corporations are suddenly talking about sustainability in a very big way. Law firms are reimagining their own role. How do you see this providing a new area of legal practice within India? Because we, of course, know that we need a huge mindset change among our corporations, companies, business enterprises, regulators, and the larger ecosystem, can the law firms lead the way to create a more responsible, way of conducting business through sharper focus on ESG?
Raj, before I reply to that, just one point on that entire feudalism slavery part, because see, we have a lot of law students who are listening to this. So one of the areas we really need to improve is the soft skills as lawyers, as law students. And when I say soft skills, two major issues which India suffers on the both laughter index, we are one of the lowest in the world. And trust issues also, we are one of the lowest in the world. These are the two major things. And why I'm saying this, because as lawyer, you need both of them really. You need to have a sense of humor. We are too rigid about it. We are absolutely, nobody talks about it. And when I do a show and I bring lawyers now and we just talk about what kavita you read and what music you listen to, it's one area we need to invest. So that's one. The second thing is fundamental changes. When I was doing law, law was a last refuse in 1997, 98. Today, 10 years back, bureaucrats, doctors, engineers, their children used to do law. Today, politicians' children are doing law. And they don't want to become only lawyers, senior advocates and judges. They want to own law firms. So now the owning of law firm is a new culture which has happened, which shows that there is a lot of potential for thousands of young law students who are coming out of it. Having said that, in ESG, again, it's a fundamental DNA change you have to do. I'm just reversing the NDA. You have to do fundamental DNA change. When I do my environmental practice, I have an ecosystem. Because I'm an environmentalist first, then I think about climate in a very different manner. So I work with TERI, Indian Institute of Forest Management, ex-members of National Green Tribunal. Like you do a corporate deal, you have your bankers, you have your auditors, you have an ecosystem. So for doing environmental law practice, you can't do just a litigation advisory, or if you are taking a pharmaceutical company, you just can't be looking at a term sheet in a detached manner. You have to feel the flora and fauna. You have to hear the voice of the bird. So unless you go in the skin of the game, it would be difficult.
Thank you, Sudhir, for that. Well, we are almost coming to the end. I have one last question to each one of you. The same question. Pallavi, now we are, of course, talking about the globalization of legal profession. If I were to ask you a bit of a blue sky thinking about the future, what do you think is going to be some of the big implications of technology, including artificial intelligence and robotics and machine learning, on the way legal profession is going to be structured for the next couple of decades? And what should lawyers and law firms do to be adaptable to that change that is inevitable? You need to unmute yourself, Pallavi. You need to unmute yourself, Pallavi. That's the most important line of the pandemic.
Okay. So, sorry. Well, I don't think I can, I follow Richard Susskind as much as to see what is the future of law. But what I can see is two things. Technology, adapting to, use of technology, adoption of technology, fine-tuning technology is going to be very, very key for the sustenance of any law firm that's growing, wants to grow, or even remain in the same place that they are in. For a couple of reasons. The pandemic has taught us that we can work from anywhere in the world and we can get deals done, as Gautam just mentioned. The last year has been an eye-opener because one fine morning, all of us started working from home and we did things that we could never have imagined or dreamt of. And all our firms did billions of dollars of deals, all getting onto Zoom calls through the day and through the night. Financing deals happened, huge deals, IBC deals happened, a whole lot of things kept happening. So I think, and that was all because all of us probably invested in technology in a very big way and continued to invest in technology through the years. And the way I see the use of technology is it is more facilitative than substitutive. It's not going to substitute the human mind. It will make things very simple for you, make you do things better, faster, more efficiently. Today, any case, clients are demanding more for less. So if you want to give your quality service, you want to give the client what he needs in a far more effective way, I think adoption of technology is important. I think the second thing which Chris touched upon is our social obligations. And today, a lot of younger people are actually asking us, what are your CSR activities? What is the pro bono work that you do? Will I get an opportunity to do something? If I have a proposal, will the management of the firm look at it? And how can we do it? So to that extent, we all have to change what we think at one point of time was not very useful expenditure is going to become over the years. Because I have a number of people in my firm who are constantly asking us, what can we do? Can I do this? Can I do that? So I think that is also going to be a very important thing. And the third thing which I did want to mention in the context of what others have mentioned is learning. I think, Gautam, you rightly said learning, training, knowledge, the one-on-one thing, that's not going to be possible because flexi working, partially working from the office is here to stay. We cannot wish it away much as we may want to, which if you're thinking the traditional way, we all have to accept that the future is going to be flexi working. You want to come in 2 days a week? I don't think we should expect our people actually to come in all 5 days in a week or 6 days in a week to the office. People have been efficient from working from home. Let them work from wherever they want to be. So long as if they are needed, they are available to you at the times that you need them. And I think therefore in that context, training and growing people, the one-on-one communications that people, seniors have with, that has become important. So how are you going to adapt yourself and the firm to learning, training, and knowledge sharing is going to be critical. We at the firm have developed a learning platform. We call it Clementine, where most of the training and development and CLE that we do is now online. You log into the platform, there are videos which are live or recorded, which are available. There is a whole course curriculum that is set in, and people have to log in and do that. It's mandatory, and we keep a watch on how many people log in, what they do, what is it. We get feedback. So we improve on those videos, podcasts, all of that. So the new age technology, how we use them to our benefit is going to be key.
Thank you very much, Pallavi, for those very, very valuable suggestions and perspectives for the future. Let me move to Chris Parsons for his reflections about the future.
Yeah, look, thanks, Raj. I'll be brief because I'm very mindful of the time. Look, I'm going to take a slightly contrary view, but suggest there may be a big opportunity here for some of the young, bright lawyers who I hope are listening to this. So the contrary view is that I don't believe that law firms have really embraced technology in a major way. I think sometimes we convince ourselves we have. So, are we connected around the world? Yes, of course we are. Do we use social media effectively? Yes, of course we do. I mean, we've set up a number of centers around the world dealing with legal process outsourcing. So it's repetitive tasks that can be more effectively done through the use of technology. And we also have a tool called digital analysis, which helps to allow clients a better insight into how a piece of complicated litigation might turn out at the end of the day. So we are embracing technology, but it's not nearly as far reaching as I think we sometimes think it is. And I think that if you had a lawyer in India in 1950 and they were placed within one of our law firms, one of the law firms today, I don't think that they would see the job as that different. Are the numbers bigger? Are there more complications because it's more global? Yes, but the underlying principles of what we do day to day are exactly the same as they were in 1950 and probably even right to the turn of the century. And so I think there is a really wonderful opportunity when you look at what is happening, especially in India, around the unicorns that are growing up, the use of technology to, deliver food quickly, deliver products quickly, help people arrange their holidays effectively, all of these things where technology is absolutely at the heart of the business. And for me, technology is not yet at the heart of the practice of law. And if somebody can do something in a way that I can't even begin to imagine, I think it could be transformative. And so I can't imagine it because, like Pallavi said, I still think that the business of lawyering is about our individual ability to find solutions to complicated problems. So if somebody out there listening, Jindal Global Law School or any other of the leading law schools in India can come up with some really out-of-the-box thinking about certain aspects of lawyering, and they can express that in a digital way, I think they could become very wealthy indeed.
Thank you very much, Chris, for those fantastic comments. Let me quickly ask.
Ultimately, please. Technology is an aid to our own mind to make us think differently, use technology to be faster, quicker, get more information and more knowledge in a shorter time frame. It cannot substitute the human brain or the human mind. That's my belief.
Yeah, well, Pallavi, so that's exactly what Chris seems to be challenging, which is to some extent what one can talk about as to how artificial intelligence and robotics and machine learning can potentially take away some of the things that currently lawyers and law firms and individuals are doing, which might potentially have a change in the legal profession. But that's a future that we are all waiting to see to happen. Thank you, Pallavi, and Chris, for that. Nishith, over to you. Nishith, please unmute yourself.
I'm so sorry for that. So the way in which I look at is that there are two parts, every business or profession. I think it's both an art and a science. I think first thing we have to start an art side, that is, your philosophy of the organization, the purpose for which the organization exists, and the purpose for which our profession exists, and the purpose for which, so purpose-driven approaches will be taken as we move forward, and more and more people will recognize the importance of that. Similarly, there are factors of psychology, understanding people. So in any business or any profession, there are 4 dimensions. One, you got clients. Okay. So if you're good clients, number 1, then you need good people. Okay. So how do you take care of the client? How do you take care of the people? You may have great clients, you may have great people, but you don't have processes. So you connect them through good processes. So if you do these 3 things right, balance, it's called balance scorecard. The finance is a lagging indicator. So we'll have to do innovation and both in terms of philosophy, psychology, all of the factor, anthropology, everything goes into building a client actually. And use of technology, as Pallavi mentioned, and this also mentioned to some extent, that technology is the greatest social leveler. It allows smallest player to work, compete with the largest. Of course, the whole ecosystem of competition will undergo change. It will be not just competition, it will be competition. You compete and cooperate and work together to create a better world for everyone. Same way you have to look at the people, okay? And there are a number of things that Pallavi mentioned, all of us, like education. But similar to people education, we have to educate client, I think. So we have one program called Client Continuing Education Program, CSAP. And, but if you want to do that globally, obviously you need technology, and a lot of things can happen through that. And of course, the processes. Now, we'll have to revisit the way in which we manage ourselves. Just to share some example, I'm not just teaching or talking. For example, we removed process of leave policy. We said no leave policy. You take as much leave as you want in the whole year. We don't care, okay? Just focus on the purpose and what deliverable is, right? Freedom with responsibility and accountability will be the new model. Hierarchies are falling down. It's very difficult to manage, centralized system. So we have to learn those new techniques. I don't want to again bore everybody with too many things, but I thought these are few things that, processes are very important, but processes cannot take over people. Otherwise, people will be bogged down in process. And these are balancing, and so I think if we can learn some of these things and learn from each other, I think we'll have a better place in the world.
Thank you, Nishith. Thank you so much, Gautam.
Yeah, I think I'll sort of, I think like Nishith mentioned, I think there are two parts to this. One is process, the other is sort of the substantive aspect of the work we do, i.e., tomorrow can artificial intelligence or the internet replace legal advice, right? On the first one on process, it's quite interesting. I think the legal profession, there was an article a while ago in the Financial Times that in terms of if you were to pick an industry that is least progressive when it comes to change, the legal industry is bottom of that pile. And it's not just embracing processes to become efficient, but if you look at even the way we are structured, we are probably among the last, we're literally dinosaurs in our organizational way, because we still, we have 500 partners. We are a partnership, which I think is our strength. But if you look at other big players, other industry participants, they've corporatized, they've brought in external capital, they've innovated even when it comes to their organizational structure. I feel law firms, traditionally have been least receptive to change, and that also factors in on embracing technology when it comes to process management. Having said that, I think in the last 5 years, I'd say that has massively come under scrutiny, and the sole reason is the focus on profitability, the focus on sort of the gulf in profitability between some firms and others has grown so exponentially that everyone now sees technology as a must-have to be economically, financially survive, in a marketplace, right? Especially if you're talking about big law, right? So I think law firms are embracing technology not out of, sort of forward thinking, but in some ways, a lot of them are reactive to seeing it as tools to make themselves more efficient and more profitable. Okay. And therefore, I feel there are areas of law which from there will be areas, there'll be the use of lawyers there'll be a requirement, a natural upward movement towards the more sort of high sort of involved work, right? Discovery, diligence, those kind of things can be kind of, processed out. Now, when it comes to whether legal advice can be entirely automated, honestly, Raj, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, can medical advice be automated, right? Would you trust sort of, taking your child and getting medical advice and giving them medicine after seeing the internet and Googling? I just think at some level, right, the human element is the reassuring factor. And I think on that second point, I think I'm just unsure, right? I'd be interested to see how that changes, how
Thank
that
you,
evolves.
Gautam. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sudhir. You have the last word.
Yep. Professor Raj, I think one of the biggest challenge which at least Indian legal fraternity will face, law firms will face, courts will face, is lack of employable people, lack of lawyers who will be skilled up, upgraded in their knowledge. The problem is most of the law schools in our country, 7 except the 5-7 like yours, they advertise and bring a student with fair and lovely kind of advertisements that you will pass out and Amarchand will recruit you or Nishith Desai will recruit you, but are they in a position to be recruited? That's your biggest challenge today. The second thing is, how do you make them employable? How do you make them ready for training contracts, which is normally happens in Herbert Smith. So nobody in India understands that you need to be trained properly to work in a law firm. So these are the two major areas which I feel: employability factor of the law students beyond 400-500 or 600, when you're talking about 40,000 or 50,000 young lawyers coming out of these law schools every year.
Thank you very much, Pallavi and Gautam, Chris, Nishith, and Sudhir. What a fascinating panel discussion. I deeply appreciate your time. On a more personal note, I want to thank Pallavi and Nishith in particular for inspiring me long before the establishment of our university. You both have been pioneers in that for inspiring me, and thank you for that. I want to thank Chris in particular to be a big champion of our evolution since the early days. And of course, Gautam and Sudhir have been dear friends. So thank you to all of you for joining us in this panel. I know for sure that everybody who watched this and who will be watching it will have immense things to learn and in many ways reflect about both the past, the present, and the future of legal profession. Thank you.